Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for another story time today. I am very excited about story time because I just recently found this book. It's pretty new and it goes along perfectly with one of my favorite activities to do with kids or adults or by myself. But it is super fun to get a little bucket, get a net, or you could even use like an old kitchen strainer, and head on down to a lake or a river or a pond and do some scooping in the water. The muckier, the better. So muck and dead leaves are perfect environments for little critters to live in. And we're going to learn all about those little critters today. And they actually have a story that they can tell us. And we're going to learn how to listen to that story that they have to tell us. So I'll talk a little bit more at the end, but without further ado, our story today is called Creek Critters, and it was written by Jennifer Keats Curtis with Stroudwater Research Center, and it was illustrated by Phyllis Saroff. So let's get started. Lucas, let me show you how bugs can tell you the story of clean water, I say to my little brother, wiggling my eyebrows. He hates that. And see, what kind of bug does she have? Dragonfly. Where do you think dragonflies live when they're little? Lucas rolls his eyes, but follows me to the house. We grab the same tools that scientists use. Rubber boots, a net, a bucket, and small paintbrushes. We tug on our boots and head back to the freshwater creek. Do any of you use the same tools as scientists? I bet some of you use these things. Maybe you are a scientist. Glumph! We step right into the water. This part of the creek is called a riffle. It's shallow, and the water runs fast enough over the rocks to make a bubbling noise. Downstream is a pool. It's deep, and the water is calm. I splash water into our bucket and plop it next to the tall sycamore tree. Quickly, I spin around before Lucas can push me in. That water is cold. Do any of you have siblings that will push you in the water? Mine probably would. Like a team of scientists, we work together, searching for bugs that can only live in healthy water. Aquatic macroinvertebrates, or macros for short, is a fancy name for these creatures. If you break it down, it's easy to understand. Aquatic means water. Macro means big. In this case, big enough to see with our eyes. No microscope needed. Invertebrate means no backbone. Young macros, called larvae or nymphs, live in water. As they grow older, some kinds of macros change. They go through metamorphosis. These adults fly around and live near the water, while other adults may spend their whole lives underwater. So metamorphosis is maybe a word you've heard as it relates to butterflies, right? Butterflies start out as an egg. Their larva form is a caterpillar. They go into a chrysalis or their pupa, and then they metamorph or change into a butterfly. Lots of our other insects do that same thing, but we just might not see them as often in their larva stage or when they're little. Lots of our insects are underwater during that stage, which is super cool. Let's see what we can find. I yank up a rock. Lucas and I check the slimy bottom. Nothing. We wade over 2 steps. I snag a smaller gray stone for inspection. There's some weird-looking crawler with big eyes on there, Lucas says, very unscientifically. This is the bug Lucas found. Does anybody know what this is? I carefully scrape the bug into the bucket. He's a small but mighty dragonfly nymph. The young dragonfly spurts around as if he's wearing a jetpack. He sucks water in and spurts it out the back, zooming from one side to the other. We put some sticks and leaves in the bucket so he can hide. So before an adult dragonfly flies around like we usually see them, they spend time in the water. as a larva, dragonfly larva, and I think they look a little bit like aliens during that stage. Some dragonflies might only be in the water for 4 weeks. Some types of dragonflies, like a big one that lives over in Asia, they might live in the water for 8 years before they emerge. Most of the ones we have are maybe 1 to 3 years in the water, and up here in the north, it might take them a little longer than it does for the same species in the south, which is pretty cool. Lucas flips over another rock. I spy what looks like the smallest turtle I've ever seen. It's hanging on for dear life. It's actually a water penny, a beetle larva whose back looks like a turtle's shell. These beetles don't like creeks with pollution or muddy buildup called sediment. We put the water penny in the bucket. So they're using their science tools to gently remove it and put it in their bucket. You can probably tell these camouflage creek critters are hard to spot. They can be as small as your eyelash or as big as your thumb. They hide under, in, and around stones and pebbles. Some skitter into large bunches of leaves called leaf packs. You can scoop up the pack with a net and slowly sift through it to check what's in there. We really want to find mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies. These bugs are the most sensitive to pollution. They often cannot live in dirty water. If we find them, then we know our creek is healthy. So we call these insects, or these critters that they're talking about, these macroinvertebrates, we call them indicator species. So to indicate something means to tell something. So these indicator species are telling us about the health of the environment. They can't live where it's dirty and polluted. So if we find them, that's a really good indicator that that environment is healthy and clean, which is a great thing to find. So they tell us a story. Lucas and I push the net underwater along the creek's edge. We shuffle our feet, kicking around so lots of stuff floats into our net. I pull a hunk of rotting leaves, one of the best bug hiding places. Of course, Lucas grabs a slimy leaf and flings it at me. Ugh, Lucas is always doing stuff like that. I wipe off the brown goo with a groan. We quietly stare into the net. It's hard, but you have to be patient. The itty-bitty bugs are almost the same color as the leaves and are so small that you have to look for movement to find them. It might take a few minutes. You have to be patient. There! A caddisfly larva pokes his head out of a homemade case of rocks, leaves, and twigs. This crafty critter creates his house using sticky silk as underwater glue. Lucas gently plunks him into the bucket. Before moving on, we examine the rest of the net to make sure there are no more bugs. They'll die if they dry out. So you have to hunt for bugs responsibly. Return those leaves to the water afterwards in case there are more insects in there. Now, it's Lucas's turn to scoop with the net. We shuffle our feet again and a heap of gray, gooey leaves glides in. As we pluck out the last leaf, Lucas spots a 6-legged bug with 3 tails and fluttering gills. It's a mayfly nymph. We add him to the bucket where the other bugs creep, shuffle, curl up, and hide. So this is what they look like as adults. Maybe you see big groups of them emerge throughout the summer. This is what they look like in their larval stage underwater. I peer into the bucket, but don't see the dragonfly. There he is, stuck to a stick. We can't leave him there for too long. Dragonflies are predators. They may eat our other new friends. You see him on the stick? And if you do this activity at home and you catch a dragonfly, there's a very good chance that it might eat something else in your bucket. They are very good predators. Although I really want today's adventure to include a stonefly nymph, we have found special macros, such as the mayfly and caddisfly, that live in clean water. Lucas now knows how water bugs can tell tales. They tell a story about the health of the environment. With that in mind, my brother and I decide to call it a day. We take our storytelling macroinvertebrates back down to the creek. I smile, and together we turn the bucket over into the water, returning the bugs to their home. It's a very important part of this activity. We always want to return them home because they're an important part of the environment. That's the end of our story, but they do have some activities here for you. So I'm going to show you this picture up close. There are 3 bugs hiding in there. The water penny larva, the one that looked like a little itty bitty turtle, the stonefly nymph, and the dragonfly nymph are all hiding in the creek. So feel free to pause it so you can get a good look. Could you find them in the creek? The other thing we have going on here is a matching from young to adults. So I'm just going to show you the answers quick. Well, I guess, again, you could pause it and try to guess for yourself. Oops, hopefully I wasn't showing them at the bottom. So this is a mayfly nymph. Right? This is what it looks like when it's underwater, when it's young. And this is what it's going to look like when it's an adult. And you might see big hatches of these, like I said, throughout the summer where they come out by the thousands. You might see their skins in lakes when they emerge. This is a caddisfly larva, and again it makes this cool little protective home for itself out of rocks or leaves or sticks that it glues together underwater, and then when a predator comes it goes and it goes inside there, so it's nice and safe. When a caddisfly emerges, it looks like this guy, kind of like a moth with these really long skinny antennae though. This is a stonefly nymph. So if you recall, this is the one they didn't find in the creek. And these ones are really hard to find when you're out. They only like very, very clean water. And this is what a stonefly looks like as an adult. Okay. And then, of course, I find lots of these. Depending on the species of dragonfly, some of them are pretty tolerant of pollution, so they might live in areas that don't have very clean water, but that means we find lots of them because they can live in a lot of different kind of water. And they might be slightly different shaped. Again, there's lots of different species and they all kind of look different. So these little alien looking dragonfly nymphs turn into what we know as dragonflies. Okay. The last things in the book, I will put a link to these if you want to download them for yourselves. These are 2 really great things. If you want to go out and be scientists yourself, I highly encourage it. Like I said, you need, well, what was on our list of things? They had boots. If you don't have boots, that's okay. Your feet can get a little wet if you have some sandals that can get wet, or water shoes. You do need a net and a bucket. They had a little paintbrush to help them kind of gently remove things from the rocks. If you don't have that, that's okay too. The net or the strainer and the bucket are your big tools to be a scientist for this. And then they give you this scientist notebook. So once you get out to where you're going to collect some macroinvertebrates, you can check all these different things, right? That's collecting data like a scientist would do. So they have some background information about where they are, what the weather is, what the conditions in the water are like, and then you can try to find what bugs you might see. When you find them, they have this little guide to help you. It says in this group 1, these things are all really sensitive to pollution. So if you were to find any of these things, what does that tell you about the water? If they're sensitive to pollution, that means that they can't live where there is pollution. So if you find them, do you think that water is clean or dirty? Clean, right? Otherwise, these macroinvertebrates wouldn't be able to live there. These ones are somewhat sensitive, so that means that the water isn't, it might not be super clean. It could be super clean because they can also live in really clean water, but they can tolerate a little bit of pollution. So there might be a little bit of pollution in that water. And then group 3 is tolerant of pollution. So if you were to go out and you only found these ones, only macroinvertebrates that can live in very polluted water, what do you think that might tell us about our environment? There's probably some pollution, right? It's always good to check more than one spot though, just to be sure. Okay, so you can be a scientist at home with this. This will be kind of in lieu of activities that we normally share, but again, I'll put the link in there so you can download these charts and bring them with you if you would like when you go out to find your own creek critters. Okay, So thank you so much for coming to Storytime today. This is truly a super fun activity to do as a family, with kids, as adults. I do this more than I would like to admit to see what's living in our creeks. You always learn something new, and this is a great time to do it. None of these things are going to be harmful to us, so please don't worry about that. Just go out and have fun, explore, see what there is to find, and hopefully you'll learn something new about our insects. So get outside, get your buckets, get your nets, get down to a creek, a river, a pond. I know we have high water in some areas right now, especially in the driftless area. Up north, you might have really low water because you might have more of a drought. So be careful. Go with a parent. Make sure that it's safe. Wear a life jacket if you need to. And have a ton of fun out there. Share with us what you find. I can't wait to see. Bye.